Hello, and welcome back to Refrigerated Reviews. My name is DQP. Let's get started. So, this week is a real big one. This is The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, one of the most overhyped games of the entire year, really. But the big question is, does it live up to that hype? And my answer, short answer, is yes. Absolutely yes. It's incredible. And you'll have to listen for the rest of the long answer. So there we go. But first, let's cover a little bit of Witcher history, because this is the third entry. The first one was alright. I didn't think it was all that great. I thought it was okay. It was very dense, and it was very hard to get into. But it was good enough to get a cult following and get a sequel. And that sequel turned out to be one of the best RPGs of the decade, which is kind of a surprise. But it contained a story that had a lot of weird politics, and it introduced what I feel is now a trademark. Well, it didn't introduce it, but it emphasized this element that I think has now become a trademark of the Witcher series, and that is that there's no real such thing as right and wrong in the Witcher universe. Everything seems to occupy this great moral gray area. There's no paragon or renegade meter telling you whether what you're doing is good or bad. You just have to make those decisions on your own. And everything is very fuzzy. And you can bet that once you make a decision, it's going to come back to bite you much, much later in the game. And that's always been an important part of the Witcher franchise, and it's something that The Witcher 3 carries back with it with flying colors. So what is The Witcher 3 about, anyway? Well, let's set the scene a bit. First, let me say this. You don't need to have played the other two games to understand what's going on in the third one. The developers have advertised this as a good jumping-on point for the whole Witcher franchise, and I can kind of agree. Playing the other two games will definitely help, but if you're looking to get into this franchise for the first time, Wild Hunt is actually a surprisingly good place to hop in. But let's set the stage, as we were trying to do earlier. By the end of The Witcher 2, Letho, a former Witcher, has killed off a lot of the leaders of the northern kingdoms. And this has set the stage for the southern empire of Nilfgaard to come in and sweep up the rest of the countries and basically take over this whole continent. And that's the political background. You are Geralt of Rivia. He's a Witcher, and he's a monster hunter for hire. And the Emperor of Nilfgaard, I forget his name, has hired him to look for his daughter, a girl named Ciri. And the interesting thing is that Ciri was actually raised by Geralt to be a Witcher. So this means that Geralt really has to accept this offer. And along the way you'll run into old and new characters in different situations. But most likely you're probably going to be distracted because The Witcher 3 is now this huge open world game along the veins of Skyrim. Now don't get me wrong, it's very different from Skyrim. The combat is a lot more complex and difficult, and I feel like most of the quests are actually a lot more interesting than they are in Skyrim. Let me give you one example, and this is an early side quest. You go to this tower. There's a curse on this tower that you're sent to lift, and it turns out that at the top of the tower there's this ghost named Annabelle. And the reason the curse is there is because her life was never really given closure. She was attacked and killed by peasants, and her boyfriend never got the closure that he would have wanted. So, and it's a complex side quest that has a very unintended result. And it's just something that really stood out to me. And in fact, there's actually a whole mechanic in the side quest that is, I think so far, I mean, this is a first impressions video. Before we get too much farther, I haven't finished this game yet. I'm only about 13 hours in. But, there's a mechanic that's introduced in this side quest that, as far as I know, isn't in any other side quest. It could be. But it's introduced through here, and it makes this side quest feel unique. And there's a lot of side quests in The Witcher 3 that are like that feel unique and have this unique, interesting challenge to them. And it's not like another game like, say, the first Witcher, where you have to go around and ask people, it's like, oh, well, if you want this information, you'll have to collect 10 glorious monster skins from this specific monster. It's not like that. It's very much in the same style as The Witcher 2, where each of the side quests feel like their own thing, and the quality of the side quests is up there with the quality of the main quest. It's just as good. So, it's a game that's going to keep you occupied for several hours. The combat is very similar to what it was in The Witcher 2, which means that it's challenging, you have to really think when you fight, and it's this very interesting Monster Hunter meets Dark Souls kind of mix. And I would advise you to play at one of the higher difficulties. I chose the second highest, dubbed Blood and Broken Bones, which I think is a fitting name because I died a lot. But it's a good difficulty to play the game at. It makes fights a lot more harrowing, but it makes those victories feel a lot more potent, if you know what I mean. One last note that I want to bring up is how it looks. I'm playing this on a gaming PC. My graphics card is a GeForce GTX 970, and it looks drop-dead gorgeous. It's one of the best-looking games, I think maybe ever, in my opinion. There are some bugs here and there. Occasionally you'll run into like several bits of furniture dancing on the floor on their own. Or maybe your horse will get caught up on a piece of scenery and stop moving, and that'll kind of tear you out of the experience. But for the most part, this game looks gorgeous. It's definitely a showpiece for the PC, and I'd imagine it's a showpiece for the consoles as well. From what I've seen, the console versions also look quite pretty. So, on top of being a generally good game, this game is also a graphical showcase, and that's really cool. There are a lot of smaller details. On top of the side quests, you also have things like horse racing. There's a card game called Gwent, which I think is so good that it could be its own indie game. Maybe it's just because I'm addicted to it, but the fact that I'm addicted to a mini-game in a larger open-world RPG really says something about the content of it. But I'm not going to go into detail on that because I'm already running very late in this review. Let me just say this. Having played 13 hours of The Witcher 3, this is a game you should get. And it doesn't matter if you've played the other Witcher games or not, it gets you up to speed pretty quickly, and it's very, very good. I hate the phrase believe the hype, but for The Witcher 3, you should believe the hype. It's very, very good. I'll leave you with that. Thanks for hanging out with me this long, and I will see you next week with a game that probably isn't as hyped as Wild Hunt, but it'll still probably be pretty good, right? We'll see. Thanks for hanging out. See you next week.